Right then, let's go.
Hello everyone and welcome back to part 2 of the 2-on-1 Powerchair Football podcast with Adam McEvoy, powered by MK Battery. In the first half of this conversation, we focused on Adam's journey and the wider talent pathway, how England has built a system that now connects grassroots through to the senior national team. But now we turn our attention to the present with the Nations Cup just around the corner. This is where all of that work comes together. Adam has had just under a year in charge of the senior squad, and this will be his first major tournament as head coach. So in this second part, we'll be exploring what it means to step into that role, the preparation that's gone into the squad, and how England are shaping up ahead of Italy. It was great to discuss the pathway, how it's evolved, the purpose it serves, and the role it plays in shaping the future of elite powerchair football in England. But I think that gives us the perfect platform to now shift to the here and now, because while the pathway is about what comes next, right now all eyes are what's immediately ahead. As we record this, the 2025 EPFA Nations Cup is just over a week away. And this England squad, the product of all of that development work, is about to face one of its sternest tests to date. The group is finalised. The preparations as of the weekend just gone are complete. And the expectations could not be higher. And this is where all of the planning, culture setting really gets put to the test. So throughout this section, I want to focus on the senior team itself, the preparation, the philosophy, the pressure, and how England are shaping up heading into Italy. Adam, your appointment last October came at a really important time. You had less than a year to prepare for the Nations Cup, a competition that doubles up as European glory and also World Cup qualification. Can you take us back to the moment that you first considered applying for the head coach role? I know you touched on it in part 1, and how the opportunity came up and what your initial reaction was when you was given the call that the England head coach role was yours.
I think I touched on it earlier on, didn't I, in that talking about it from an application point of view, and that indecision to begin with of not necessarily being completely sure on whether or not to apply, certainly with my dual role across coaching at a club level with Seven Oaks and then feeding into the talent program as coach for the NETP group and then supporting with the development squad. I was really comfortable in that area, but with the opportunity of having, I suppose, a bigger level of influence. And then with that meaning, it can also feed from the top down as well as bottom up. And then considering when the opportunity might come up again in future, if I chose not to apply, my mindset shifted and moved towards going for it. So it was something that, as I said, it was a late decision, but something that felt that because of the unknown of when the opportunity may come up again, it was a case of now or potentially never, or not being right in the future, and just being willing to take that jump and having the support from my wife to be able to do so. So going through that process, and as I mentioned earlier on, around a really lengthy and challenging interview process. So full credit to the FA for really wanting to dig deep into those that they'd shortlisted in terms of their attributes and their knowledge and capabilities, followed up by then having to deliver a practical session at a camp a little bit later down the line, to receive that call to say that we'd like to offer you the position was something that, you know, you have that sense of relief, but also that sense of pride and achievement of having been offered the position and knowing that actually now that it's becoming more real and you've got the opportunity to really have an impact going forward. And, there's a little bit of that feeling a bit daunted by it as well, because it is what it is of being a senior head coach for an elite side and a group of players who are absolutely top tier, fantastic, and, stepping into the unknown and feeling a little bit uncomfortable by that.
Was there any hesitation or nerves knowing how quickly you'd have to get the team ready for this major competition, simply because of the expectations that are now attached with England? We were, of course, finalists in 2023. We were champions in 2019. And now the expectation is that England will always compete, if not be ultimate champions.
Funnily enough, no. I don't think there was that hesitation from a expectation point of view. But I think that's twofold. One, because of my own expectations of, well, that's part of the job. You have to go in and deliver and reach those minimum standards, which are obviously set very high. But secondly, because of being part of the program anyway, knowing the players and being in and around the squad and having visited the squad over numerous years to come and observe and try and learn more about how they play and just how that could then benefit me as a coach and how I could then take that back to either at a club level or obviously then further through the pathway latterly with the NETP, and how then with the practices and the elements of and the style of play that the seniors were playing, how I could then almost break that down a little bit so that it was in more sort of bite-sized chunks to then be able to then influence and support the coaching for the NETP. It didn't really play into my mind that was, the pressure would be there, because, as I say, it's an expectation, and also the sheer quality and the talent within the group of knowing that that's going to be the case is something that you just take it as that's a given, and we have to work towards achieving that. And that's exactly what we set out to do from the very start.
11 months in, a week away from traveling to Italy. Talk to me about the first 6 months. What did you want to put in place right away to set the tone for your tenure?
The first 6 months felt a little bit alien to me, because it was in a couple of ways. One, because of the balance of the day job and then trying to fit this in additionally, and the initial challenges of doing that, because there's so much you can get involved in and the depths that you can go to with being part of the senior coach, but also feeling a little bit uncomfortable, to be honest, and feeling a little bit like I didn't deserve to be there. And I know people could say, oh, don't be daft, etc., etc. But in terms of that, feeling a little bit, not fraudulent, but that, when you've got a squad of that level and you've got to deliver, then there is that little bit of pressure. So there was the pressure to begin with in terms of, but more so from a coming in and trying to have a positive influence on the group and make my mark and try and get my messages across, not around being able to deliver and what the pressure was, because that's what it is, but how I can try and build good relationships with the squad. So that was part of, how I was feeling at the time. But that has subsided, and I think with the regularity that we've had the camps, and with the ability to sit down with the players, be it as a group or individually or in small groups, it's made me feel more comfortable. I would hope and think that they feel more comfortable with me, and obviously with Craig as well as senior staff, in terms of what it is we want to work towards and how we want them to play, to try and be as successful as possible. So the key messaging has been from the very start around not changing the style of play, because it is who we are. One of the opening questions on that very first camp was, who are we? What is the England way? And everyone was very much aligned in terms of, this is how we want to play. We want to play possession-based football. We want to be positive. We want to bring the goalkeeper into play and utilize all 4 players in possession. And I was very much aligned with that as well, because that's what I'd known from a development and NETP coach point of view of this is how we're going to look to play and this is how we can do it. So my mindset was very much in agreement with that in terms of we don't need to change it. What we need to do is add to it. So from the World Cup, and recently we had some insight information from the Game Insights team at the FA on England scored the most number of open play goals, but percentage-wise they scored the lowest number of goals from the set piece. So trying to change that and add more to our set piece game so that we've got almost like a second string to our very capable bow is something that we were really keen to address. And we are starting to see the fruition of that. So if we use the Home Nations, for example, back in May, across the 4 games, we scored 22 goals, and 11 of those, so 50%, came from set piece. So to have that nice mix and blend of goals coming from open play, moving the ball, but also knowing that we can score from a free kick, corner, kick it in within the first phase or the second phase of that ball coming into play, then that's what I want us and will continue to work on with the squad, because everyone knows, both here in England and internationally, the way that England try and play and they'll almost try and pass you to death. Well, teams have become more accustomed to that and switched on to try and counteract that and really frustrate and deny the space. Well, if they do that and we can't score from open play because their defensive shape and their structures are very fixed and set, then we need to change their defensive shape. Well, we do that. Well, one key way of doing that is by winning a set piece, and then they have to change. They have to adjust. So if we can win a corner, then we know that they're going to have to change. Can we then be more effective from corners? So we've tried to make sure across camps, across the camps that we have across the weekend, every weekend we focus on set pieces as a minimum of one of the 4 sessions that we have on a usual basis. That has increased over the last couple of camps to make sure we're really trying to be comfortable as a group with the different options that we've got. And then the test will be for us to try and put that into practice later this month.
I was going to say, I'm looking forward to this catalogue of set-piece goals in Italy, irrelevant of the opposition that you're facing. You'd already worked closely with the FA. We spoke about the initial relationship with Will Perkins for the RETP. That's progressed to all these different levels, but I think it's fair to say being head coach is a completely different level. Now looking back over the 11 months as head coach, how has stepping into that role challenged you personally and professionally?
I think professionally, the challenge has been around, well, multiple challenges. Firstly, as I mentioned, around that balance between the day job of development manager and then this added role as head coach. Also around now, there's more emphasis on, for me, managing the staff around me. So the MDT, the team that was the mixed disciplinary team that we've got, multidisciplinary team. So whether it's it's Craig as my assistant, we've got Martin as physio, we've got Adam Tudbury as our analyst, making sure that effectively I'm managing all of them as well to make sure that we're all on the same page. And for me, I wanted to make sure that was a collaborative process. So it's not me saying, this is what I want and being very sort of autocratic with it. It's, this is how I see things. How do you feel like you can contribute to this? Where do your strengths lie? And I think now after 11 months, we've got a really good structure as a staff. We've got good relationships. We all get on well. Everyone knows their role. Everyone's accountable for what it is that they have to do. And we make sure that we do our damnedest and work our hardest to make sure that we work towards that. But at the same time, we also know that we can switch off a little bit too. And that's really important for me, is that we can work hard, but we also need that time to relax and switch off a little bit, because it is very, and it can be intense with the pressure and expectations. So it's trying to find that balance, which is not perfect, but we're starting to work towards making sure that we've got that time just to decompress a little bit and laugh and have fun and tell stories and jokes and whatnot. And that's something that was really important to me. Likewise, we're building the relationships with the players because of coming in with a new staffing structure and trying to get everyone aligned and feeling happy that things are in the right place and they want to play for Craig and myself, and they are happy with our direction of travel. So again, it's very much a collaborative process of making sure that we explain what it is that we're looking at and how they can best feed into that, and it not being just solely led by us. It's, this is what we want to work towards. How do you think you can add value to that? And I think it started off initially with maybe just the senior players feeding into that, as you'd expect. But now I think we get a lot more input and feedback from everyone, and even from younger players like Adam McClellan at 16 are coming forward to give feedback, to throw ideas into the mix, to say when something's great or when something isn't working or doesn't feel right. And just that whole piece seems to have grown and progressed it in a positive manner. So those were some of the challenges that I was keen to address, but also, you know, how we could try and work them out and put things in place to make sure that it's, if we're gonna do well and if we're gonna progress, we all have to be contributing to this and we all have to be aligned to move forward. And I think that's what I saw was the biggest challenge from a professional point of view. Personally, then, it's around that probably internal, as I said a little bit with the previous question, around feeling like, am I doing the right things? Am I making the right decisions? It's much more, the responsibilities become more immediate because of the proximity and the closeness of the competition. So it's making sure that I feel as if that it's the right thing to do, and, you know, definitely that on occasion where it's sort of that little bit of doubt of, is this the right thing to do and making the right, but luckily it's speaking to people like yourself or to Dean or to Craig and other staff as well, around just checking in and just asking those questions to make sure and just gauge that feedback as well. So that's the way that I've tried to work it, and I think it has been successful so far, and it's just a case of trying to build on that going forward, I think.
Having been really fortunate to spend some time with you and the England squad in camp, I think that shift between having that elite mentality, locking into the training, making sure that you're progressing, developing, connecting, but also that the social side, when you're away from the training court, away from the video analysis sessions or anything pertinent to you being present and focusing on football, that social side, the laughing, the joking, it's a real family feel. We speak about Powerchair Football community being a real family. But on the last episode of this podcast, I said that this is the most harmonious I've ever seen the England squad. They feel so connected. It's so nice to be around them when they're not playing, but there is that shift. As soon as you're there to concentrate on the football, there's no distractions. There's almost no friends outside of your little ecosystem. Having spent time with the camp, I've also been able to observe yourself and Craig, and I can say from the outside looking in, it looks like you have established and cultivated a really effective relationship as kind of a 1-2 overseeing the England team. Talk to me about that relationship with Craig, because I rate him so highly as a coach, as an individual, and I know he brings tremendous worth to you and the team.
Craig's been fantastic from day dot. So I've known Craig since 2015, 2016, when in his early days of being chair of the SPFA, first met Craig when we went to Largs for the Scottish FA's. They had launched their disability strategy, and first got to know him there, and always got on really well with Craig, but it was much more of a professional relationship and appreciation, but from a distance. And when James Watkins at the FA and approached me to say, thinking of bringing Craig in as a team manager and to support you. What do you think? Immediately, it was, yeah, fantastic. Happily work with Craig. And it's been great from then. What you see is what you get with Craig. He'll give you honest answers and feedback to everything, which is absolutely fantastic. And it's very much a collaborative relationship between us. So whilst he's been and continues to be extremely busy from a team manager point of view and operational perspective, when he's able to support and input from a coaching point of view, from a player development point of view, we are always there in terms of having those conversations, whether it's at camp or speaking during the week build up to camp or post camp as well, in terms of some of our reflections and some of our actions ahead of the next camp. He's been fantastic. He's been really diligent in everything that he's done, completely open and honest and transparent with everything, as I am with him. And it's just, we just gel and work really nicely. And it's a relationship that, all being well, fingers crossed, can continue to flourish for years to come.
You spoke about coming into post and there not necessarily being the need to uproot everything because the foundations and the quality of the squad was evident. The European champions finalists in the World Cup final. How important has it been bouncing off the leadership team in that group? I'm talking about the Chris's and the Johns, really strong personalities who will no doubt have a certain way they want things to be done.
It was fundamental for me. And I was a little bit unsure to begin with around how that things would be, certainly in those initial conversations, that initial camp, but it didn't need to be, because Chris and John have been absolutely fantastic. Spoke to them individually in that first camp about, and obviously spoke to every single player individually, but spoke to them about what they wanted to see, how we could impact and best support them as individuals, as players, but also as part of their senior leadership team in the group. And as with Craig and the staff, the piece for me about being completely open, honest and transparent around what it is I'm looking at and what my views are, and then seeing where they relying with their views and opinions, pretty much, there was a lot of alignment. So it made that process quite straightforward, really. And then just making sure that, just checking in regularly with them, be it at camp or every other camp, and just having those meetings, be it on an informal basis at the start of sessions or the end of sessions, or during the food breaks, lunch and dinner, or if it's just pulling them in for a meeting for 15, 20 minutes, half an hour, just to see how things are and whether it's for them as individuals or the wider group. They've been crucial in making sure that, we know where we're at with the squad. And I see the pair of them being absolutely fundamental in the success that we will hopefully have and continue to have certainly for the Euros, for the Worlds, and for years to come, because not only in terms of their absolutely immense tactical knowledge in terms of what they offer on the pitch, their leadership, and their management of the rest of the group off the pitch. Because for me, as you rightly said, it was creating that unity and that bond of, it's an 8, and it's a very, very good 8, and making sure that we're all pulling each other together was something that I was really keen to embed immediately.
What's been the biggest adjustment moving from club football and the various development roles you've held on the player pathway to taking that top job?
I think for me, it's just working with the sheer talent that you've got at your disposal. So at a club level, you might have a group of 6 or 8. And of that group, you may have 2 really talented players. And then you've got players that are good players, but maybe not quite to that level. You come into this squad with these players and you've got talent everywhere, to the point where it makes decisions around who starts or who finishes really, really difficult. which is a fantastic problem to have. But at the same time, you're still going to have a problem of, you might be disappointing players because they might want to start and they might not want to be on the side. So it's dealing with that in terms of trying to build the rapport and the relationships with the individuals in the squad. And basically, because of the depth of talent we've got, it was that messaging for us around, don't see it as a negative if you don't start a game, for example. Look at it as what you can do with your skill sets and how you contribute whenever you come into the field and whenever you start to play. And we saw that as a prime example in the USA game because, for example, twofold. We've got Dylan Cowsall and Dan McClellan that started on the side, came on and both made great impact. Dylan scores the winning goal. Dan McClellan comes in for the last few minutes, and his game management and the way that he bossed Riley Johnson into the corner to slow the game down, to waste the time for us to see the game out. Two absolutely wonderful examples of how players can contribute regardless of the amount of time that they get. If their contribution is positive, and that's what we set from the start, we want you to make positive contributions regardless. If you're doing that as staff, we will be happy. That just set the tone for us, and that exemplified it for us recently.
For sure. It's almost an inevitable question, but do you feel the 6 years coaching on the talent pathway at the various levels have influenced the way you manage this side?
I think it helps in the sense that with half the squad, I've got a pre-existing relationship with them because I've coached half of them through RETP and ETP and certain development levels as well. So they know what I'm like as an individual. They know what I'm like as a coach in terms of how I'm going to get my messaging across to them, what my standards and expectations are. So that made that a little bit easier. And then I think being part of the community and obviously the pathway with the senior squad that I hadn't coached until now, but knowing what I was like as an individual. So it wasn't like I was a stranger coming in and having to build those relationships from nothing. There was always something, there was already something there, which I think has definitely helped. And I think the way that I am and the way that Craig is in terms of, it's almost that leadership, but in a more quiet sense, in terms of we know when we got to switch it on, we got to go to work and we've got to put everything into it. We know when we got to switch off and be able to relax and have that downtime, but also know that those standards and expectations are across everyone. As soon as you put on that badge and you represent England, that's where we're at, and that's the level that we have to maintain regardless.
I know you'll play a role in creating a coaching pathway, but I think you serve as the perfect example now. You're the case study. You started at the RETP level alongside, obviously, your stuff with Seven Oaks. And now you've climbed the ladder. And I think we want that to be used as an example to aspiring coaches that if you are talented, if you're driven, if you can really understand and adopt the 6 key capabilities and let them influence the way you coach, the sky's the limit. You can go from a club level coach to an RETP coach to a national immersion talent program coach, and then up to the various England levels.
Well, when you put it like that, I suppose I hope so.
Yeah.
I think that if that's the case, then yeah, why not? Because like I said earlier on today, if it's that leaving a legacy piece of it being in a better place than when I first came into it, if that influences and inspires other coaches that want to get involved and realize that they can go through that pathway, then I certainly am all for it and will continue to, bang the drum and support that as a method through, because the only way to get better and certainly be involved and improve as a Powerchair coach is you've got to be immersed in it because of the nuance and the differences that exist within our format. You've got to learn, you've got to know what that is and how that impacts the game and you as coach and how you get that messaging across to your players, because it is, the chair being part of and be molded as part of the player. How you can then utilize that as one example to be able to support you as a player is something that, as an ambient able-bodied coach, I'm never going to understand, but I need to understand it as a player of what I mean. But you need to be able to understand it as a coach, and how you can then try and then support the players, and certainly young players, to be able to learn and progress as part of that.
For sure. You've been part of England setups before, supporting home nations, whether that's developments or seniors on the periphery. But the home nations earlier this year in Largs was your first official competition as head coach. First chance to see and lead England in a competitive environment. What was that experience like for you personally, leading the senior side in a tournament for the first time?
It was great to be, as you rightly said, been involved in home nations before. So the understanding and the comfort of knowing what it is you're walking into, and the competition as a structure and what it looks like wasn't new. So that was a comfort, and obviously the venue and location been to before. So that all helped in terms of making us feel relaxed and settle into it from that respect. It was more around trying to see, and it was the first-hand evidence as to whether or not the players were accepting and taking on board the messaging that Craig and I were trying to reiterate, embed into them around different ways to be successful, and knowing the opposition that we would be facing, that in some instances it would be far harder to get immediate success because they would be sitting in low blocks and really make it tight and small spaces and be aggressive. And so it was what we know that we can be successful in one way, but actually if we need to be successful in another way, and we need to add that second string to our very capable bow, as I said, can we demonstrate that? And the fact that we scored a variety of goals, and a mixture of open play goals, set piece goals, was really good to see. And the fact that we then got to mix up the teams as well, so putting on different pairings and different partnerships and making sure that everyone played in every single game. Yeah, I appreciate that that might not always be the case when you get to a European semi or a final or a World Cup final, but in terms of trying to see everyone for periods of time to see if they were aware of and taken in, and then trying to deliver those messages, it was a perfect sort of starting point for us, as we were talking it as like a step one in a long journey, and it was good to see.
Goes back to what you said earlier about having a squad of 8. It's a squad of 8, then you're going to be relying on each of those players individually, but if they can exhibit that versatility in different positions, maybe ones they won't play, as you said, in the semi-finals or the finals, it will round them out as players, and it will give them invaluable experience. I think further context is needed because all 3 opponents at the home nations are going to Italy as well to fight for the same title as you. So an invaluable opportunity to trial and test the different forms of football you're referencing, the free flow and attacking, the set piece play. So really important that you got a grasp of what that entails as head coach, and ultimately the one that makes those decisions about the tactics and the way you approach games.
Yeah, very much so. And obviously knowing that we were going to draw at least one of them in the group, and obviously ending up with both Scotland and Republic of Ireland, it, almost giving us a little bit of insight pre-comp as to how are they likely to play, how are they likely to set up, was really, really useful for us. And to your point around the squad depth and the variety, all of the players have got individual strengths and super strengths and skills, so they can each bring those in to the game. So it's been a challenge for us as staff around, well, how do those super strengths almost complement each other, and what are the pairings that work best? So it was a really good opening for us to see what those pairings look like in a competitive environment when the pressure was a little bit more than what it would be at a training camp, for example.
For sure. So a few months following that successful home nations, we had that historic week at St George's Park. So I just want to delve into that a little bit. England hosting the USA for a week-long joint training camp, which culminated in two, and I put this in air quotes, friendly fixtures because there was nothing friendly about them. A fantastic, unprecedented opportunity to test not just the senior national side, but the development side as well, against what many people regard as one of the best nations in Powerchair football. Talk to me about your experience of that week and what were your main objectives going into it?
It was a great week, an extremely intense week. And I think everyone was physically and mentally drained by the end of it, just because of the sheer volume of activity that had taken place during that period. I think for us, it was a great test. So obviously, and as Tracy alluded to, when they got in touch with us and yourself to begin with back in November last year around the interest and ability to come to England for a training camp, it was something that, we were so intrigued by and really wanted to explore, because apart from competition at World Cup, we never get the opportunity to face the US. So the option and the opportunity to have them at St. George's Park for a week and then putting that schedule and structure together in the months leading up to that, knowing that there would be a couple of development games, so with the introduction of development squad, because I was keen to make sure that development squad could get exposure as well, because if they want to make that step up, they need to be used to and be comfortable playing against teams at that level who are going to play a completely different style to what they are used to, as well as the two international friendlies, official capped games. That was something that it was, can we try and round off the week with real top level quality and games? And then obviously adding to that around, can we make sure it's open door as well to get people in, because the squad rightly deserve to be showcased and rightly deserve as many bums on seats, so to speak, as possible. It was something that, as a week in terms of the potential for it, was massive. And in the months prior to it being confirmed and letting the squad know, was part of our communication around, this is what we're looking at, are you keen? They were all so keen and jumped at it in terms of that as an option and really wanted us to pursue it. So obviously we're really glad that we did. And it was a great test because, as I say, aside from World Cups, we never get to play them. They play, almost the opposite in terms of flip side of the coin of a style of play to how we are, and the sheer power and pace that they possess. We're not used to having to deal with that from a defensive point of view and how we can react and cope. And it's difficult sometimes to almost create that in a training capacity as well, of get the lads to go, we want you to play almost completely opposite to how you're used to. So throughout the week of trying to create that environment for the squads to be able to become a little bit more comfortable with, and then put plans in place to be able to counteract that, I think we did a really good job. And credit to when we were playing some attack v defense games and we set up the attacking team so that in a USA style, they actually performed the USA style better than the US did. Whilst we struggled with that, it was knowing that if we struggle with that but can cope, when it comes to the game, we can manage probably a little bit easier, and we did. And although we drew obviously the first game and won the second game, we could have won the first game as well, realistically. And when we reviewed it as a group, we've looked at it and gone, we actually created some really good chances. That little bit of luck, being a little bit more clinical, final pass, we could have won that game even more comfortably than what we did.
I know it wasn't a competitive game, it wasn't a tournament game, but there was so much pressure because it's one of the very few times that England have ever played a match on home soil. Talk to me about how those two fixtures helped you as head coach assess where England are certain players at their level?
Well, I think ultimately, obviously, we went in. Obviously, we initially had a squad of 10 when we first came in as a staff, and then obviously that went down to 9. So it was utilising that week as a way to be able to almost finalise and confirm the 8. I think it was great to see where we were at in terms of, other than France as first, number 1 ranked team in the world, us as number 2, and US as number 3, to play against a team that is going to pose really challenging questions to us in terms of how they're going to look to try and score and how they play. Well, how do we counteract that? So utilising, and again, credit to the staff and to Adam Tudbury in terms of our analysis, and then the input from the lads themselves, and even some input prior to the game on the Sunday. We had a short training window in the morning, and it was a conversation piece that came up in terms of how we can look to defend their kick-ins and set piece, and how we can try and counteract that and we changed the shape a little bit. Now, that was player-led, which for me is fantastic, because it shows that they're really conscious around what they can do and how they can impact on the game. And that feeds into me and can help. And I'm not going to say, no, we shouldn't do that. If they're going, we think this is going to work for this reason. My response was, okay, let's set it up and practice it. We practiced it, got some reps in. It felt comfortable. It looked good. The lads were pleased with it. So in that instance, as the squad, it was, are we going to adopt this change? Yeah. Okay, fantastic. And then we put that into place, and it actually was really effective. So it helped shape things in terms of knowing that, there's the buy-in, and they can contribute and come to us to go, we've got an idea. And then secondly, in terms of that, well, how do we cope against a really top team that puts us in some challenging positions and moments? And probably the last 5-6 minutes of that first half, they really put us under pressure. The fact that the lads then managed to cope with that, got into half time, we had to readjust a little bit, and then we managed to flip the game on its head, was massive credit to them. But it also gave us an idea in terms of that the mentality and the belief is strong as well. Yes, we might be struggling, we might have to adjust a little bit, but that doesn't mean that our heads dip and we're going to struggle and we're going to roll over. Far from it. They showed the true mentality as a group, and even the players on the sideline as well, in terms of that encouragement piece, and then coming on and contributing to the game as they did. We were absolutely delighted as a staff in terms of what they demonstrated to us as to where they were at, individually, collectively, and as I said earlier on, taking on the messages that we were trying to pass on to them.
I love your comment about adaptability and the players being the drivers for switching things up tactically, and it touches on what you said earlier about bouncing off those leaders, the ones that have been there, done that, competed within these finals in European championships and World Cups. And that's really important. As a spectator, it was so good to see that adaptability play out, because facing a non-European nation is so unique, so unheard of in the lead up to a major competition. And in my last episode, previewing the Nations Cup, whilst the USA are completely unique in the way they set up their player profiles, I think the role of Riley Johnson and the way you've said about Dan McClellan nullifying him gave me a lot of encouragement for if and when the opportunity arises that you face France, because certainly in the dribbling form of football, Riley and Momo are somewhat similar. Momo's very effective and very versatile, can play different forms of football, but the one that's proved most effective in major competitions and what we saw in the recent Club World Cup is when he wants to lock it up, frustrate the opposition, drive it forward. That's where opposition have really struggled to nullify France. But that second friendly, certainly against USA, showed me somewhat of a blueprint of how these players can adapt to that really frustrating opposition who are trying to negate the quality of football.
I think we're now in a position where if we need to play a similar type of game and be equally as frustrating to them, we can do so, and we can match them. And if that means we have to lock it up a little bit, I believe our individual and collective technical abilities and tactical understanding and proficiency means that, yes, we can do that, but then we can come alive at a moment's notice. And if that means that we have to do that at stages, but there are stages where the game might not be as pretty, but it's effective for us, ultimately, we are there as a unit to produce positive results. And positive results for us are obviously ultimately winning. But if we're then sort of showcasing things to the best of our abilities, that moment in time means the ability, and what the ability means, that we have to do something that's a little bit dirty, a little bit not as attractive, so be it. And I think that we're in a position now where we can do that from a chair perspective, a player perspective, in terms of their understanding and ability to accept that, and then also know that at a moment's notice, as I say, we can switch it up and deliver.
I want to talk about that Sunday fixture, because having the pleasure of being there and commentating, I can say that it had real edge to it. The crowd, the intensity, everything felt like more than just a friendly. And it's truly one of my favourite memories working in the sport. Everything that it represented, the week leading up to it, an England game at St George's Park, the home of English football, seeing Chris Gordon produce those 2 moments of magic, the crowd erupting and yourself celebrating like a long jumper. What did that occasion mean to you, not just as head coach, but also for the whole squad, the whole setup?
I think from a squad point of view, and I can't speak on behalf of all of the squad, but I think it was maybe an indication of where they're at. And with this being, this period is 10, 11 months of being under a new coaching staff of, well, where are we? And pitting ourselves against a US gives us a really good yardstick for where we're at as a group. And the fact that they came away playing at times some really good football, some really smart football in terms of managing the game, but coming away with a positive result. The way that we had to come in at halftime and settle things down and say, right, what we need to do now is we just need to slow things down. We need to get the ball into their half and their defensive third as quickly as possible to really try and put the pressure on them. Yes, we had a little bit of luck, but I think you earn your luck a lot of times, don't you? And Chris exemplified that with his 2 goals, and it was absolutely fantastic to see. And I think it's that confidence piece of, we're only a couple of months out from the Euros. If we'd come away with 2 losses or some poor results or poor performances, we go, oh, crikey, we might be not as well advanced as we thought we were. But the fact of, as I say, arguably we should have won both games, but a draw and a win helped to really instill that belief in them, and then the belief from myself as well personally around we are in a good place. The squad are taking on the messages. There's that belief around that it's a collective, it's a group, it's everyone contributing regardless of the amount of minutes you play, and knowing that whole dynamic around the squad is in a good place. And for me, that was wanting to test. It was a great test to see where we're at, because being in each other's pockets for a week effectively is a good test, because when you go to a Euros or a Worlds, you're going to be away for a week, 10 days, 2 weeks. You've got to be able to be getting on as a group. You've got to be able to be clicking when it comes to the game time, but also knowing that if things don't go your way, you've got that little bit of resilience and steel about you to go, we're good enough to get this back, and we've got abilities and methods and ways to be able to get back. So I think it all added to that mentality and place where we're at now of really looking forward to next week and getting out there ready to defend the title.
You've spoken about the strengths and the successes, and also how you use that whole opportunity to focus on set pieces without giving a great deal away. did that camp also highlight areas where work is needed before Italy?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you just want as much contact time with players as possible. And it's trying to find the right balance between a group of players that love nothing more than to play 4v4 and to just play games. And it's trying to find that balance of giving them what they want, but also around trying to put parameters and frameworks in to make sure that it meets the needs of what we're trying to get from them. So how can we, for example, we put game scenarios in, but it might be that if we're working on a particular set piece, any time that the ball goes dead in that attacking team's favour, they then start from that set piece. So if we want to practice a corner, anytime the ball goes out for if it's a free kick or if it goes out for a sideline, they restart from that corner. So you're trying to get what you want out of it through methods which appeal to the players, but doesn't detract away from the thing that they like to do the most as a group, which is to play against each other, because they've got this insatiable appetite to play and to win when they're together. So it's how we've tried to utilize sessions to best meet the needs of what we're trying to get out. Yes, we've got some times where we've got to maybe break it down a little bit more, and it might be a little bit more stop and start, and there might be a little bit more around that communication coming in, trying things, etc., etc. So it was a really good test to see where we were at, but also know that there are still areas of the game that we need to work on. Will we get to that before Italy? No, but we've got to think bigger picture and long term around. We've got a World Cup in just over 12 months' time as well, so it'll be the reflections post the Euros as well around what we've done well, but also the areas that maybe we don't necessarily execute in or need to work on, and how we can then work on that as the areas of focus going forward for the next 12 months.
Pretty much immediately after the full-time whistle of that second friendly, you confirmed your squad for Italy. The 8 players who will carry the expectation of a nation wanting to be 2-time European champions. Just to confirm: Ed Common, Chris Gordon, John Balding, Marcus Harrison, Dan McClellan, Tyler Eve, Ethan Fisher, and Dylan Kelsall. Talk to me about that process, selecting your squad of 8 from what is clearly an abundant pool of talent. It must have been incredibly challenged to whittle it down.
Yeah, massively. All of the players that have been part of our squad since day one have been fantastic in terms of their application and what they've delivered on the pitch. So it was very, very challenging, and everything we tried to, and Craig and I discussed this over many, many hours over the months that we've been in, and everything we've tried to relate it to what worked best in terms of the technical areas of the game that we feel that we needed to cover off in terms of what are the attributes that all the players bring to the squad, and how do they fit in as a dynamic, and to be able to have that balance as a group. And the US week was a great week for that, because, as I say, we had that sheer amount of contact time for sessions and for gameplay, and then some of the informal stuff that we did as well just really helped to. And it wasn't only until really the back end of the week it helped to cement the decisions that we'd come to. Happy with the decision and content with the decision, but it didn't make that process of having those discussions any easier. And it was never. It's not nice at all. It's not a nice process, but in terms of just being open and honest around what it is that we were looking for, what we saw, what we didn't see, it's been our mantra from the start around just being honest with and transparent with the players, and that was no different.
As has been the case for the last 3 or 4 competitions, you've gone with the established core: John, Chris, Ed, and Marcus, players who have been at the heart of England's biggest moments, know how to win at this level. On the other hand, you've got 4 younger talents, Dan, Tyler, Ethan, and Dylan, all of whom have come through the pathway that we touched on in part 1 and are now stepping into the major tournament environment. I know Tyler was part of the World Cup squad, but was very much on the periphery, didn't get many minutes. Dan was featured a little bit more, certainly in Sydney. And then you've got Dylan and Ethan. This is the first time they're stepping up to this top level. Can you give us a little bit of insight, nothing in great detail, into the squad, the players you've selected and the strengths they each bring?
I think for me, it was, and it's just the way that it's evolved, in that you nailed it in terms of it's the combination piece really between the group of players that have got the experience and the knowledge of being in those high pressure situations and those competitions. On the flip side, you've got that younger group that have got that absolutely insatiable appetite to want to improve and to deliver, and it's meshing that together. And we've got a real fantastic mix, and the way that they've all been able to integrate and learn from each other, and calling on the senior more established and experienced players to be able to feed back and give that insight and knowledge. It's been brilliant, because yes, we can offer that insight from a coaching perspective of what we've seen or what the video clips have shown, but then what those senior players can do in terms of adding that additional context and knowledge, and if I do that, you need to do this for this reason. It's just reinforcing the messaging. And it's, as I say, I think it's the best squad that we've ever put together. It's a great squad in terms of the dynamic off the pitch, on the pitch in terms of the different skill sets they've got. You've got unpredictability from players like a Dylan. You've got the just sheer magic from Ed. You've got the game management and the nuisance that is Marcus Harrison in terms of his way to manage games and be really effective and be fantastic in terms of needing to slow their game down or press and be really aggressive. You've got the 2 gents at the back in terms of their sheer knowledge and ability and understanding to be able to manage and look after and guide Ethan and Tyler as young players with massive potential. The way that, for me, I've set it up with them in terms of, if there is feedback to be given, it's how we can make it wholly constructive. Might not be positive feedback, but it's got to be constructive feedback in terms of, that went wrong because of this. This is what you need to do to correct it. Or in this situation, this is what you do differently because that resulted in that. And they've embraced that, and they've been fantastic in terms of just the maturity and that leadership piece from them as senior players. And the same with Ed, even though Ed doesn't necessarily say much, the relationship he's got with Tyler from a club level and how he's able to influence Tyler positively, how he's able to influence Dan, and even young Dan at 16, the way that he's blossoming and growing into a young leader in terms of the way that he feeds back as well. It's everyone you're starting to see more, as I mentioned earlier on, around that ability to be able to integrate, give that feedback, and hold everyone to a high level in terms of that accountability, but also knowing that, when we can switch off, we're having that good camaraderie, which again is led by the senior players and John and Chris in terms of the way that they've managed the group off pitch as well. It's been a pleasure to be a part of, and I'm really excited by the potential of them all.
We see it as the 4 senior players and the 4 younger players, whilst it's a squad of 8, and we want that to very much be the narrative around it. Was it a conscious decision to have that 50-50 makeup of experience and youth? Was it just kind of materialised organically?
No, it certainly wasn't a conscious decision over, I've got to have want to have a blend. It's just how how things have progressed over time and how the players have stood out. And I suppose we talk about it, and you talk about it as experience and youth, but only youth from a chronological point of view. You look at Dan McClellan, who went to a World Cup, has won a Champions League, and then at the Club World Cup was absolutely dominant against Brian Weiss. For someone so young, the years of experience in his mind far surpasses his chronological age. And the other young players as well that have won national leagues and have contributed so positively to competitions and events. Just don't see it as that. It's how they all bring their super skills and their talents to the squad, and picking what we feel and what I feel is the best blend to whatever dynamic we need to put out against whatever the opposition is at the time. And we might have different setups based on who the opposition is.
I was looking at the breakdown of the squad, and I'd have to go back to former squads to see how pertinent this point is. But 7 of your 8 have won the National League. So they've been right at the top, irrelevant of age, irrelevant of experience. These spots aren't given away in these top teams. They've earned them. They've climbed this ladder. So there's definitely no charitable spots at club or country level. For those 4 younger players, firstly, how impressive you've been with their attitude, application and talent. You've touched on it, but I just want you to elaborate a little bit more. And how important is this experience for their long-time development?
I think the experience, both only obviously the camps over the 10, 11 months, but obviously for the competition itself and the home nations, for me is will set them up for years to come, because they all have the potential to be prolonged England players playing in many competitions, receiving many caps, if everything goes well in terms of their development and the continued attitude and work rate, etc., and looking after themselves. It's something that, and we say that to them, and we've had conversations with Ethan and Tyler are great examples of trying to fill the positions of Chris and John is not easy. And, in instances of John, he's been playing the game for as long as the lads have been alive, which is bonkers to think about. So in terms of trying to continue to work with them and develop their game, but also talk to them around, they've got to view it as a long-term thing for them. And it's, from our point of view, yes, we want to expose them to the competition at the highest level and give them minutes where possible, whilst making no guarantees of how much and when, but saying to them that they've got to think about it with a long-term focus in mind, because it's that, well, how do they continue to improve and develop to the point where they fill those positions and they own those positions for years to come. And they've been really receptive to that and understand that it's part of the wider picture. And the same for Dylan as well. Fantastic young man who's got huge potential, and with his leadership aspirations as well. Very, very exciting player. Dan McClellan, again, as we say, 16, so the youngest chronologically, but in terms of his experience and his abilities, playing well beyond his years. So how they continue to develop and thrive is up to them. But from our point of view, we want to continue to facilitate that as best as possible as coaches, and obviously utilise the senior players to help them as well.
I don't know if you listened to our last episode of the podcast, but Greg Baxter and I sat down to predict the Nations Cup teams, successes, players, and I was probed for my player of the tournament, and I selected Dylan Kelsall, and I also gave a very honourable mention to Dan McClellan. And whilst that may be how it plays out, may not be how it plays out, the fact that I have complete confidence in the younger players stepping up to this level seamlessly and performing an invaluable role within a nation that has non-negotiable aspirations of lifting that trophy at week's end, it speaks to the level of their development.
For me, yeah, I completely agree in terms of the potential for them as individuals. And also the fact of, they're probably not going to get everything right. They're probably going to make mistakes. They're not going to make the right decision at the right time. That's okay. As long as they're trying to do the right things and trying to execute, that will see them develop and go far in our game and in life as well. They know that they're not going to get everything right, but it's doing the right things more often than not is going to see them go far, as I say. And yeah, they wouldn't be in this squad if I didn't have full faith in them in terms of their ability, but also in who they are as young men as well. So very excited by them and Ethan and Tyler as well, but the whole squad in terms of the way that they all look after each other and pull those standards up together as a collective it can only be positive in my words for how they've been.
Yeah, and that's why it was so nice to spend time with yourself and the squad at St George's Park during a recent camp, because that harmony off the court is the best I've ever seen it. I've said about the harmony being the greatest I've certainly ever seen it. Everyone pulling in the same direction, the senior players leading the younger players challenging the senior players. It's just this perfect blend now, and we just have to see how that gets put into practice when the stakes are the highest.
Absolutely. And for me, those younger players now become the senior players of tomorrow.
Yeah.
And if that's ingrained with them at this age and this experience level now, by the time that they are older and far more experienced, that next group comes through, they then hold those same standards and look after and manage that younger cohort in the same way going forward. And it just becomes that cycle and process of, this is how it works, this is how we do things, this is the standards and the expectations, but we're all in it together, and we will get the way that we look after each other is in that group mentality, in that group ethos of, this is how we do it.
You've given me the idea of bringing those younger players, younger senior internationals into the RETP setups to talk to and converse with these young, hungry players of 10, 11 years old that want to emulate what Dylan has done, what Dan has done, Ethan and Tyler also, because they are the shining examples, not just of tomorrow, but today as well.
There are role models going forward. Absolutely.
So let's now pivot to the Nations Cup, because as we sit here today, we are just over a week away. England head to Lignano Sabbiadoro for the 2025 EPFA Nations Cup. 6 days of competition, 29 matches, and the crowning of a European champion. England go in as the reigning champions after winning the last edition in Finland back in 2019. And with that, of course, comes a huge deal of expectation. The group stage has been confirmed, and it throws up a real variety of opponents. We've got Ireland, Denmark, Scotland, and hosts Italy for very different challenges, each bringing their own style, but all capable of testing England in unique ways. If that wasn't enough, this tournament also doubles up as qualification for the 2026 World Cup in Buenos Aires, Argentina, with the top 5 finishers earning their ticket. Before we get into the specifics of preparation and opponents, give me your overall thoughts and feelings heading into this Nation Cup. Excitement, nerves, pressure?
Definite excitement, because it's a major competition and we want to do well, both from a squad and as an individual perspective. Pressure, yes, but I think that's, as we said earlier on, that's part of it, and that's that standard you have to accept and embrace. And just looking forward to getting going, really, in terms of we've got a day to acclimatise and rest a little bit. We're trying to see if we can put in some training games prior to the competition and get used to the facilities, some training sessions, and then it's just it's go time. It's that knowing what we've got in terms of the schedule. I think it's great, obviously, apart from the Saturday that we've only got one game a day, because I think it gives us time to reflect, it gives us time to analyse, and it gives some downtime for the squad and the staff as well, which I think is really important, because I think 2 games a day every day is very intense. And I think it's hard to get up for a game, then have to drop off and then get up for another game. I think that's really challenging. So 1 game a day, I think, works really nicely. And just then seeing how we cope in that environment and seeing how we work together as a group. So I think it's something that, once we get in and settled and get our bearings, it's going to be all systems go, and can't wait.
How do you prepare your squad to face that variety, facing very different opponents in relative quick succession? I know you've got them 2 games on the first day, and then it drops down to 1 game each. But even in consecutive days, it's still a fairly intense turnaround. Mm-hmm. And that while keeping England's identity, something we've spoken about across this podcast, do you adapt your style to each opponent? Or is there a belief that England's way of playing, now you've added the set pieces, the ways of negating the low block, does that England way of playing get the better of anyone, particularly in the group stage?
Am I biased to say I think it does? I think it does. I think for us is the style of play is our style of play. Will never deviate from that, but we might have to tweak it a little bit. We might need to be aware that certain elements of how we want to look to play might not be as successful because the opponents are going to set up to try and counteract it. But that's okay. That's how we work as a collective, to go, well, if we can't do A, we'll do B. And if we can't do B, we've got C as well. And that's how it's, for us, it's how we look at that. So from the group stage, from that point of view, it's the analysis and the preparation beforehand, which is ongoing at the moment. So obviously we know our opponents. So looking at understanding how are they going to look to play, who are their key players and the strengths that they have. And then, well, what does that mean for us in possession, out of possession? What do we look to do? And then, as I say, it might just be the little tweaks and the additions of, okay, against this team, we're going to need to look to do this for this reason. And then we've got stuff like the video to be able to back that up. And we've got examples, be it from some of the home nations content or some from the World Cup, and looking at how teams are going to set up. And then it's, we'll do our team briefings beforehand. We'll talk about what it is we're going to do, how we're going to look to do it, and then see what it looks like on the pitch at the time. It may tweak a little bit because obviously in some contexts of, like in Italy, for example, we've never played them before. So that might be a little bit unknown, but we'll utilize some of the knowledge and information that we've got from previous competitions, EPFA Cup, for example, and then utilize that alongside our strengths to go, well, okay, this is how we think we're going to be successful here. When we get to obviously the knockout stages, that might be a little bit different, but then we're going to have the footage and the knowledge of what they've and how they've played in the group stages as to, okay, well, what are the trends that we're likely to see? Are we likely to see everything? No. But in terms of getting a basis of understanding and previous footage from other competitions, then we use that to help underpin what we're going to do and how we're going to do it.
If you want to best prepare for Italy, you need someone on the sidelines with a drum banging it the entirety of the match, because the noise and the passion they bring,
fantastic,
is just incredible. I'm looking forward to it so much. And that was in a competition in Geneva and latterly Munich, where I've had the fortune of watching them. No matter where they are, no matter who they're against, no matter what the scoreline, they bring the noise. So I cannot wait to see what they bring to Italy. When you assess that group of 4, is there any you're looking forward to more than others?
Probably Italy, because it's the unknown.
Yeah.
I think because it's the host, and we hope that, and as you rightly say, there'll be a lot of noise and atmosphere around that. And also because it's the unknown. So the fact of we've never played them before, it's that little bit of all what to expect. So it'll be interesting, obviously, on that opening game against Denmark to see how they cope, and then just putting it to the test and having a really good go against them. But from a point of view of playing a new nation, I think it's fantastic and looking forward to that.
And that's what's so nice about this competition as a whole, because whilst you're familiar with Scotland from a home nations perspective, Scotland, Spain, Germany, Italy, this is their first competition. Belgium haven't featured for a couple of major competitions, so they're just finding their momentum again at international level. I know they'll be a real challenger in Group A. It's just this perfect mix and blend of the expected and the unknown, which makes it so intriguing. I don't like to jump ahead, but I'm going to anyway, because I like to play hypotheticals. In the background of all of this conversation is the possibility of meeting France, reigning world champions, and traveling out to Italy and doing the commentary. I've done a little bit of research and due diligence. I think it's safe to say, based on the unprecedented levels they've produced over the last 4 competitions, they'll be present in the knockout phases, definitely. I know within the last 4 major international tournaments, so that's the 2 World Cups and the 2 former Euros, England have played 24 group stage games. They've won all 24. They've scored 190 and conceded just 5. So a staggering record. England only managed to trump them on penalties in 2019, and that was arguably against the run of play, 2 late goals that we managed to score prior to the full-time whistle. How much thought and planning has gone into having a potential clash with France? And is that something you build towards, even while keeping the immediate focus on the group stage?
Yeah, I think it would be wrong of us to say that you can't not necessarily think about it, because of if we deliver to our capabilities, then reaching that final is something that is highly achievable, and very likely of facing France is obviously something that we're not unaware of. So I suppose we have primarily focused on the group stage, and obviously being aware of that. But if we're being completely honest, in our last camp, we reviewed the World Cup final as a group, and it's something that the group haven't done since. So watching it and talking about it in terms of decisions that were made, or what we do differently, or how we feel that we would cope in a game again based on where we're at now, spirits were high, and the feedback was positive in terms of answering those questions of what we might do differently. Or so based on that, taking the group very much at their word, and have no reason to not believe them. The fact that they're saying, yeah, we feel good, we feel like we're in a good place, and we know that we would look at doing this, and this, then that was really pleasing from a coaching point of view to see where they were at from in that headspace. And yeah, we shall see how they and others, certainly from that Group A, perform, and then look to act accordingly going forward. I think
it's very exciting. We've mentioned how this competition doubles up as qualification for Argentina next year. Is that something you use as motivation within the squad? Or I asked this question to Craig, is it you travel to Italy, you do your business, and by default, your ticket to Argentina is confirmed?
Yeah, very much so. I think there's no point us thinking about a World Cup when there's the European Championships right in front of us. And that's very much what we are focusing on. And as you say, the fact of 5 tickets available for a World Cup from a European zone perspective, well, by the nature of qualifying out of the group, sees us on the plane, so to speak. So from that point of view, we just continue to go game by game, get the results, review onto the next one, and then that's just an additional byproduct, and that flows from there. And then we can think about that post the Euros after we've had a period of downtime and reflection from there.
Final question before we move on to a quick fire round. From your perspective, what does success look like at the Nations Cup? Is it purely about retaining the trophy, knowing the level of funding and support that you have as a nation? Or do you measure it more broadly through performance, progress, personal development?
I think the success is multifaceted for me. I think the easy answer would be to say winning, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
But I think it's far more than that. And you know me well enough by now to realize that I would say that. I think for me, it's around everyone. Success for me is everyone playing their part to the best of their ability, to give the squad the best chance of success. It's playing football which showcases England to the very best of their abilities and highlighting the diverse ways that we can play now, and trying to continue to put English Powerchair football in the spotlight in terms of, it's the best in the world. The way that it is, it's undeniable, and showcasing that and showing our format and the way that we play is the best way to play football, and how we can, as I say, be varied in terms of how we play and be successful with that. And then I think I recognize the importance of winning, but if we don't have to win, in my opinion. We want to win, but we don't have to, because there's a bigger picture at stake here. We've got a World Cup to prepare for in 12 months' time, but we've also got a cohort of players that need to learn and evolve and grow around what it is to be at the top level for a long time to come. So that's not me saying we don't want to win, because we do. I want to, but is it going to be the worst thing in the world if we don't? No, it isn't, because we, as always, we would look at it, we would review it, we would reflect on it and go, what went wrong? How can we make sure that we're better for next time? If we're better next time and that means we win a World Cup, okay, I think we could accept that. But that doesn't mean that we don't want to go out there and win the Euros and retain the trophy, because that's the drive and the want and the need for all of us, and the squad are really passionate about that. But I'm not going to put the pressure on them to go, the expectation is you have to win. Because as much as they want to do that, I know that potentially that might play in the minds of some of them. So it's around, we do our absolute utmost to win, and we make sure that we leave nothing, absolutely nothing out there to go, should have done that a bit better, could have done that. And if we can go away and say that we've done our very best in terms of a staff, and in terms of a squad, and in terms of that collective, and we've got a really good bond and a unity over those 10 days, I think once we come to review and reflect over the coming weeks ahead, I think we can say that we would have achieved all of the goals that we set out to.
I mean, we've sat down now for over 3 hours to discuss all of the England pathway, how it all knits together, the expectations at every level. And no, I think you've answered the question perfectly. There is a bigger picture at stake here in terms of nurturing and developing the next generation, while still focusing on the here and now. And whilst we will be disappointed if we don't come back with that trophy, if that is the case, is how we channel it and how we then look to build for Argentina or other competitions further down the line. So it's really exciting.
I don't see this as just a short-term thing in terms of, yes, we focus on the job in hand and what the competition that we have in front of us. But in terms of that wider piece around knowing what we want to try and put in place for future generations of the squad to be as successful as possible over a sustained period of time. Yeah, I want to win the Euros, but I also want to win the World Cup and a Euros again, and a World Cup after that, and a World Cup after that. But it's what we do and making sure that we put everything in place to be as successful as possible in order to achieve that. And that's not just going to come in a 12-month period. That's going to be something that is over a 3-year, a 5-year, a 10-year period of time, whether I'm at the helm of that or not. But it's making sure that whatever happens over the years to come, we are in the best place possible to be as successful as possible for as long as we can.
I think if we act on what we've discussed in this episode, from holding ourselves to a high standard, whether it's the player pathway or really implementing that coaching curriculum, or all the other details, one thing's for certain, the talent is there in abundance. And I'm coaching players at RETP level that I'm just saying, you're a future England star. You're going to have the Dans, the Dylans and others that will be mainstays for the foreseeable future. But even seeing the young raw talent at the base level of that pyramid, it bodes so well for the next 3, 5, 10 years, as you've put it. So we will see how they fare in Italy, and then we'll maybe have a recap. But one thing is for certain, the future of Powerchair football in England is incredibly bright. Adam, we've covered so much from your own journey in the game to the pathway to the senior side, heading to the Nations Cup. I think everyone listening will take real insight from that, whether they're players, whether they're coaches, or even just fans of the sport, because it's not often you can have a real frank, open discussion about what goes into managing and coaching a nation. To wrap things up, I want to conclude with a quick fire round, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Go with your gut, short answers, no overthinking, and we'll see what you come up with.
Okay, no pressure.
So to begin, I'm going to run through the names of your England squad.
Yes. Okay.
And I'd like you to give me the first word that comes to mind. Is that all right?
Okay, let's go.
John Bolden.
GOAT.
Chris Gordon.
Mastermind.
Dylan Kelsall.
Hidden gem.
Dan McClellan.
Wonder kid.
Ethan Fisher.
Oof. Power and potential.
Tyler Reeve.
Silky smooth.
Marcus Harrison.
Nuisance in chief for me.
Ed Common.
Oh, magician.
I don't think I could have put them better myself, summarized in the nutshell, with a little bit of creative flexibility.
Yeah, a couple of hyphens in there, perhaps.
I can allow the hyphens. I would like you to tell me your all-time favourite Powerchair football memory.
Wow, great question. My memory. If I go back to... Oh, wow, great question. I think from a... 2, I'm going to go 2. I'm going to cheat. From a coaching perspective, Sevenoaks winning the National League, that season was fantastic, but going the season unbeaten and that final day and just the relief in the feeling that everyone had, the players and the parents, was wonderful. From a observer perspective, being fortunate enough to be there would be England winning the Euros in Finland in 2019 on penalties. Great way to win the game.
Absolutely. Remind me who your closest challenger was for Sevenoaks that season?
It was Leeds. So Leeds ran us all the way.
Nice. And that was 20...
That was 2017, 2018.
Very nice.
An invincible season for us, going unbeaten.
I would like you to tell me your dinner table guests, 3 people, past or present, from the world of football you'd love to have around for dinner.
Wow. Okay. There might be a little bit of a Liverpool slant on this, naming my colours to the mast.
Fine.
And probably from a coaching perspective, I'm going to go Bill Shankly, Bob Paisley, and Jurgen Klopp.
The trifecta. Very nice. My next question: if you could coach a Powerchair football match anywhere in the world, in any arena or stadium, where would it be?
Oh, fantastic question.
Anfield?
No, do you know what? I would go... Let's go to South America.
Yep.
let's go to probably the Bombonera or somewhere like that, like a home of, like a Boca
Juniors
type River Plate game where it's two teams and we just try and fill the stadium and get 60, 70, 80,000 fans cheering on a Powerchair game would be unbelievable.
The South Americans are ridiculous with their support, so they probably could. I wouldn't put it past them. But I know one thing's on my bucket list is to do Boca Juniors River Plate some point in my life to experience that atmosphere.
There's a second ticket going, you let me know.
My final question, I would like your dream team. So if you could pick a starting four with, you're only allowed to select one player per nation,
okay,
but excluding England. So choose 4 players.
I think that's a good move.
And try and consider balance and chemistry positions if possible.
Okay. Well, I would keep to the style of play that I would want to see. So I would want to see a little bit of passing of the ball. So I think I would go with a pivot pairing of Brian Weiss, and based on his performances at St George's, really impressed by David Downing.
Very much so.
So I think that could be a really positive pair in terms of their ability to move the ball. I think then, so that's France and America. I think we will put Valentino Zegarelli in one of the wide areas to try and finish things off. And then I need a second winger. So potentially someone like picking a different nation, and Abdullah Karim maybe from Australia.
Very interesting.
Maybe a bit of, and then we've got we're okay on the classification balance point as well, I think, from that.
It is something that I'll probably start to ask most guests because it really gets them thinking. If you have to take classification, positioning, chemistry into consideration, and you're only allowed one per nation, the dilemma straight away, if I hadn't put the extra ruling in about no England, is do you choose John or Chris? Because that's typically where people's thoughts go. You have to choose one of Brian or Momo. Mm-hmm. Again, it's a 50-50 flip of a coin as to which one you'd most want in your squad. And then there's other sensational players. Valentino would be in most people's fantasy team. And then there's others. There's other developing nations. You've got your Uruguays. You've got players on the continent. I can guarantee you some Belgian players are going to make a name for themselves. The likes of your Florian Lechantre and Ilian Genks, who I can't wait to see in Italy.
I think from my point of view, it'd be interesting, funnily enough, if you asked me that question after the Euros, because certainly at the last Euros in 2019 and being part of the EPFA staff and being able to see it from the sideline was that appreciation of seeing players from other nations. Obviously not been able to do that for a number of years. So being able to observe the other nations, to see undoubtedly some of the talent that is going to be on display will be really pleasing to see. So yeah, it maybe if you'd asked me that in a few weeks' time, it may be tweaked going forward. But yeah, based on, and obviously all of these players I've seen firsthand as well at competition, so that's part of the influence of my decision too.
And that brings us to the end of the longest episode we have ever recorded. Adam, a huge thank you for making the time, joining me and sharing such brilliant insight. It's been a real pleasure. As always, a big thank you to MK Battery for powering the podcast and continuing to support Powerchair Football at every level. And of course, thank you to everyone listening for your time and support. All eyes now turn to Italy with the Nations Cup just around the corner. We want to wish Adam, the staff, and the entire England squad the very best of luck as they look to defend their European title. The podcast will be out in Italy during the Euros, so we'll be looking to record regular episodes with members of the England setup while we're there. So stay tuned for those. Thank you, Adam.
Ryan, thank you so much. And thanks to the listeners for their support, and look forward and really hope they're all going to cheer us on later this month.
I'm sure they will.